Okay, so for this next video, I want to cover pushing your design, just pushing that look of that character. This is something that I feel is very important, and it's something that I see that there's certain aspects of designs that young people do, people that are struggling with their character designs. There's a couple of things that really are consistent that stand out to me when I look at portfolios. One of the main ones is just what I'm talking about: pushing your design, pushing it to push caricature, push proportion, push expression. It's all about taking it. A lot of times what I recommend people to do is take it beyond what you think it needs to be, because you can always pull it back. And that's kind of what I want to cover today. It's taking the aspects of whatever the character is that you're designing, and then really exploiting those and really pushing those attributes and making something that's really original. So one thing I'm going to start with just doing a bear character. And the reason I want to do that is my background with Disney. Film I directed was Brother Bear. And one of the things that we struggled with is, here we had a film that was populated by a whole bunch of bears. And so it was up to us to kind of figure out ways that we could make each bear individual enough that the viewer could distinguish between, who they were. And so that's a big struggle for people. I mean, there's a lot of times where I've seen video games where characters all kind of look the same, or other films where, especially with animal characters, where they all kind of look the same. And that's kind of a kiss of death. You want your characters to be really original, and you want them to be pushed, okay? So that's what I'm gonna do now. So let's go ahead, and I'm gonna do this. So I've got this document that I've started, and I'm gonna turn this layer on. What I've got here is a bear, okay? So I've done just a regular bear. That's a real bear. Let me blow that up. And so, for me, this is a very typical grizzly bear that I sketched out. I've done a lot of bears in my day. So this is the starting point. And there's things about bears that make them who they are. I mean, grizzly bears, I should say. They have a very distinguished, a very pronounced shoulder hump, that goes up in the back. That's all muscle. Grizzly bears, they do a lot of digging, they do a lot of rock turning, and they have big muscles in their backs. So that's what that is. They have this very pronounced kind of, their toes kind of point in towards each other in the way that they walk. Very big forearms, very, very big necks. Like I said, there's a lot of attributes that make up a grizzly bear. And so those are the parts of the bear that I'm going to hold on to, but I'm going to push and I'm going to pull, and with a couple of different characters, and we can see what we come up with. So I'm going to go ahead and put that off to the side. So I'm just going to put that right there. And let's go ahead and make a new layer. Let's start a new one. And let's say we've got a bear that, let's see. Let's say he's a big kind of mean guy. And the other thing too is level of character, level of cartooniness. For those of you that might be animating or designing something that's more on the realistic side, well, you might not have to push it as much. That might break what the character or the art direction is calling for. But for this in particular, I want you guys to understand what it is to push, to really push those, the expressions, like I said, the proportions. This is something that I really struggled with when I was first learning character design. It took me a long time to get to this point, and a big part of it is just doing drawings over and over and over, and pushing and pushing and pushing until you go, you know what, that's too much, and pulling back. That's what it takes. And another big element of that is to not fall in love with any particular drawing. You always want to think that it can be better and you can push it, okay? So let's go ahead and just jump in. So I've got this, and I want to, let's say he's, like I said, this big mean guy. Well, I'm going to push the caricature a bit. And like I always do, I'm going to start with that head. And if he's kind of this big, kind of nasty, rotten bear, Then I'm going to give him a small cranium. So I'm just going to come right in here and just get me, I'll make sure his head's kind of small, that cranium. And I'm going to put his eyes kind of close together. This is what I always do. And then maybe his snout comes way down. And I'm going to give him a big shoulder hump. It comes down into this body right here. So you can see I always start very loose, and I'm just doing this right off the cuff. I'm designing it as you guys watch. So you're going to see all the mistakes. You'll see all the, everything I go through. And maybe he's like, he's kind of got this kind of look to his face. I want to push that expression. Excuse me. Grizzly bears kind of tend to have these big lips. I want to bring that jowl down. Heavy face. I want to give him a heavy face. Maybe I'm going to pull his ears down a little bit. There we go. Because I want everything to I want it to kind of hang down. There we go. I'm going to shrink that up so I don't run out of room. And I'm really thinking about what I want this character to be. I want him to be nasty and mean. Kind of been around the block a little bit. Like so. I'm going to bring this, I'm going to push that hump. Notice how I'm just really, because I'm really just going loose. I want to get bold marks right now, because I can always go back and tie it down. I'm going to actually take this, I'm going to pull it out. I want that neck to be a little longer. I'm exploring. I want to find pleasing shapes. And just like on a human, if I were to draw like a big muscular person, a big brute, a big thug, I would give him a big upper body and maybe some, a smaller lower body. So I'm going to do the same here. There. So give him this big kind of barrel chest. And maybe these, there we go. And give him some smaller, it's all size right in here. I want to push proportion. I want to push the differences between certain areas. So look, you can see his head is kind of small relative to his body. And that might be right, might be wrong. Maybe I want a big, big kind of thick head, but we'll see. And I'm going to really push those big arms. Notice I'm really pushing the contrast. We'll give him some decent sized feet, and they're going to be turned in just like this guy up here. Notice how the feet are turned in, and that now, in comparison, this thing looks really tame and almost kind of cuddly, right? I'm going to pull that arm. I want that arm to feel like it's really like he's stepping. He's got these big shoulders, so I want that to really kind of come around. So I draw through. I just give them these tree trunks. I want to give them just like giant tree trunks for shoulders, or for forearms, And then here, notice I'm trying to do the same pose as the drawing I just showed you, so that you can kind of feel, you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. I'm going to have everything just kind of hang down. Lots of fur down here. So now I've got this big, I'm going to bring this neck around. I want a big thick neck. So I'm going to bring this around like so. There we go. Nice and clean, nice and simple. Notice how everything, I've got all these big shapes, and it all kind of works right in. Everything kind of leads right into this area of detail right here on the face. So I want that to, let's give him a little grimace, like so. So now I can come in and tie it down like so. And I can still do this very quickly. Even his nostrils, I'll make his nostrils a little bit bigger, like they're flaring a little bit. Wrinkled up nose right into his eye. All that area of detail, you know, really tight. Coming right in. I'm really pushing, and his eyes are kind of coming together. He's really tough. He's a tough guy. And a lot of times I'm thinking to myself, I'm making the sounds like I'm making for you now. You really want to feel that design that you're drawing. I'm giving them those two. I'm drawing through, trying to keep the shapes. I want these shapes to feel like they all come together. You know, even this snout. There's the teeth underneath that snout. The snout, I want a nice simple shape to it. And underneath, I'm still thinking there's a jaw under here. But what happens is, on bears, they have this big tuft of hair that grows over the jaw muscles. I don't like that, so I'm going to take that out. I want a nice simple line back there. And then here, now I can add some broken fur. I want everything up on top to feel kind of simple and clean. And then I'll contrast it with a lot of broken hair underneath. Maybe he's kind of scraggly in here. He's got that ear turned back. Like that. There we go. Just like so. I want all of this to really kind of contrast everything, you know, nice, simple, clean lines up on top. Real simple. I want everything to flow. Maybe up here, I can get a little scragglier. Another thing about grizzly bears is they have this kind of scruffy hair up on top of their shoulder blades, those back muscles, and then let it feed right into that hair coming off of his elbow. But then if we come down here, everything kind of leads right into this shoulder. That's his shoulder right there. And all of this hair kind of comes down. Feeds into the belly like so. So I've already established that arm coming forward like so. So I'm going to draw that in. See, by going really rough at first, I have this ability and really kind of playing with those proportions and not being afraid of going too far. Then I have, there we go, add some fur there. I have this ability to really push the design. And normally what I would do is I would come in, you know, this is just the first drawing. I would go do more drawings over the top and experiment with, you know, bigger head, and, you know, push the shoulders even more. What does that look like? And just see, you know, maybe his paws are bigger and just see what do we come up with. But I want to go through a couple of different bears just to show you, okay, you know, if you think about the different traits and then push those traits, then you can come up with different designs with the idea of, you know, you're really pushing whatever those traits are that character is supposed to be. Another thing about bears is that the hair kind of grows out that way. So like the hair here is going to be growing this way out over the arm there. And so here also, I want to keep this line work somewhat simple. I'm still going relatively quickly, but I'm being very, very bold. You know, I'm trying to be very confident with where I lay in my lines, thinking about anatomy, but I'm thinking about caricaturing the anatomy that I already know about bears. This is very important. One thing that a lot of people were asking me about whether or not, about this, and the character design course is whether or not I include animals. And for me, the obvious answer is yes, I'm going to include animals, because to me, there's no difference in designing characters for animals as there are people. The caricature level is still the same. The only difference, and this is what people get hung up on, is that you need to know that animal anatomy before you get into it. You need to do your research and understand how that particular animal is built before you start designing. Because if you don't know, then yes, that, you know, it's going to be difficult and you're going to struggle with it. But if you know the anatomy, if you get in there and draw, you know, whatever that animal is, draw that real animal first, then you know how to caricature it. That's why people can caricature people. And because a lot of us do figure drawing, but not a lot of us do animal drawing. And so you want to get in there and you want to, if you're doing animals, know your animal. You know, when I did Raja the tiger from Aladdin, I was in the pen drawing, you know, I got attacked by a whole bunch of little tigers. I was three tigers, and they weren't too little. They were about 60 pounds apiece. But I got in the pen with them and I was drawing them. I sketched tigers for weeks before I started caricaturing them and creating the character of Raja. So just to reiterate, drawing, you know, doing animal character design is no different than human character design. You're going to take those traits of whatever it is that character possesses, and you're going to exaggerate them. That's all part of caricature, and we'll talk about that in the other video. But here, so now I've taken a bear that I wanted to really push and make him feel like a big brute, and taking the things that I know about grizzly bears and pushing them. And so here's a grizzly bear that's, you know, kind of a mean guy. I gave him a little bit smaller head so that his body feels bigger. Yeah, and so there's that. So why don't I take this, and I'm going to, we'll shrink this up and I'll do another one. So let's do the opposite. So there's the big brutish guy right there. Let's do the opposite. What if we have a character that's kind of long and gangly? He's just come out of hibernation and maybe he's a teenager and he's just kind of just figuring things out. And so he doesn't have any fat on him yet. Once again, taking what we already know about bears, or actually I'll leave that on, and doing the same thing. Bears are very interesting. Bears, you know, they come in so many shapes and sizes, depending on the time of year, depending on the species, depending on where they're located. Any particular species like grizzly bears, you know, bears that live in the interior of the continent are different than the bears that live on the coast. You know, the bears that live on the coast are much bigger because they eat salmon and they get lots of protein and fat, and so they grow to incredible sizes, whereas the bears that live on the interior of the continent, let's say Yellowstone National Park or places, or Montana, they don't get as big. They don't have that fish. They don't have all that protein. They live on roots and grasses and, you know, a few small rodents here and there. So that kind of knowledge you can put towards your character design. And in this case, I'm going to do something that's completely opposite of this big guy. So now maybe we've got a guy. Let's make him a little younger. Maybe he's a little more spry. We'll give him a little bit bigger head, and we're going to make him a little thinner. And to emphasize the fact that he's thinner, I'm going to give him a longer nose. Notice how that nose just got longer and longer as I drew. Let's bring his ears down here. There. And once again, I'm just kind of making this up as we go, so I'm not sure where it's going to go. Here we go. Maybe bigger eyes. Maybe he's a little bit more innocent. We're going to pull that mouth up in here maybe. There, give him a smile. He's, you know, let's play everything opposite on this guy. Let's just make him really pleasant. So I'm going really loose. I'm looking for, broaden that brush out. And a lot of times I like to go with a big brush at this stage, because then I can just be really loose with it. So let's give, maybe he's got his furs coming down like so. There we go. And I don't want his neck to be too thick. I want him to feel a little thinner. Maybe he's turning a little bit. Let's bring him up. So here I'm going to go kind of much longer with the paws, with the front legs. And his shoulders are going to be behind his head. And there we go. There. Or something like this. And bears are like people, they walk on their heels. So I'm just going to give them a kind of a thin leg coming back here. Maybe the other foot is over there like so. So here's something completely different. And I could probably go even thinner. I definitely could go even thinner. But I just wanted to do something that still contrasts this guy, the one that we just created. Still thinking about, the bear anatomy. Bring that paw down like so. There, and I got a nice line of action through the body. Find some fluidity through there. I want this to feel like I'm bunching up some of that neck. Get this nice and simple through there. I want all my shapes to feel nice and simple. There we go. So now I can just lighten that up. And once again, I'm going to push these expressions now. Taking what I know about bears and just really pushing those attributes to suit the character description that I'm creating. So here, I want kind of a happy, teenager-ish bear. And so that's what I'm doing here. And I'm kind of accentuating a little bit of that anatomy. I want nice, simple lines. I drop that size down on that brush a little bit. So now, come in here. And if I've got, let's see, I've got, the bridge of the nose up here. There's the center line coming down. And if I've got this happening with the mouth, I'm going to come down like this. So if I got that coming up, then I want this cheek. I'm going to want this cheek to feel like it's pushing up in there like so. There. Do something like that. Come back. So just by, let me get that eyelid in there. There we go. By taking some of these attributes, like I said, and pushing them, maybe he's a little scruffier on top. We'll give him a little bit of fur up there. And I want to pull this chin forward just a bit. There. Let that come around. There we go. by pushing some of these attributes, now we got a character that feels completely different. You know, it's like I said, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Take those attributes of who your character is supposed to be, both physically and kind of mentally too. If they're a mean character, then, you know, get that expression in there. But especially the physical attributes. Take those physical attributes and push them, exaggerate them. This is what we do as character designers. It's all about exaggeration. And in this video, I really want you to make it a goal to get in there and push that design, push those attributes. Push it as far as you can. Remember, you can always come back. You can always go, you know what, that was too much, and then pull back on it. Okay? So here you can see the start of another bear, like so. Let's take him, I'm going to, rather than finish him out, because it'll take a while, let's go ahead and put him off to the side. What if we got a guy that's really fat? You know, we got a bear that's really fat. Well, let's turn these off. I'm going to do another one. We'll do one more. So now I got, you know, for me, I want, you know, really big round shapes. And I'm going to have him kind of sitting on the ground. So what do? I'm just going to start with kind of this big, almost like a bag of wet cement, you know? That's what I'm thinking. Here's his big fat neck. And he's got lots of fat coming out. Maybe there's a knee. So after I establish that shape, then I can start building on top of it. I'm going to have him sitting back. So this is going to have a break in it. Maybe that's where his belly is. Right here. There. Very, very quick, very loose. There's the other shoulder over here. Sitting there. Oh, yeah. He's sitting back like so. Maybe he's got a foot there. And the other foot's like this. I'm going to shrink this up a little bit. So here, I want to get this nice. I want to really emphasize that and then get that kind of feel right there. So I'm going to pull this over. And to really emphasize that bigness of him, let's give him a smaller face that sits among all this, that sits in all this. Maybe his tail's right there. There we go. So I've got all this big shape. Notice I'm really just being very bold. This is a big key to what you should be thinking. Now, even though I'm being bold and very loose, I'm still thinking about anatomy, and I'm still thinking about, you know, what is it that makes a bear a bear? I'm being thoughtful about the looseness and where I'm putting all the line work. So let's give him even like some real kind of fat eyebrows. There we go. I'm going to have him looking off to the left. Actually, I'm going to knock this back just a little bit, and then I can draw on top of it. So I can see. There we go. There, we'll do something like that. I'm going to pull back on that. Let's give him a shorter snout. Once again, I'm just kind of figuring this out. I really want to emphasize, you know, this guy being a big fat, he loves food. There we go, big fat cheeks. There. Everything kind of comes down this way. There we go. Once again, I'm using that small face inside all of this right here. To emphasize his size. There we go. Big fat neck. So now I've got something. I'm gonna have this come back. I'm trying to keep this side nice and simple. And then we can have a little bit of complexity over here with the arm. Maybe give him, you know, relative to body size. Give him, maybe I shrink up his paws a little bit. Give him some little paws. Almost like a baby, you know, babies have all those little rolls of fat. You can do the same thing with this guy. There we go. So there, we've got that. So now if I tie, I'm going to combine these layers. And let's knock that back. So now, I can come in here and I can start to draw again, just like we did before. And knock that size down on that brush. And I'm going to really, I think I want to push his smile even more. There we go. Little lip. And there's that chin coming down. And some fur coming down. And once again, going back to that bear nose. There we go. Bears have very distinctive noses. They look like dog noses. There we go. Or dog noses look like bear noses. Who knows? There we go. And bring that right up. And I'll just color that in real quick. So, you know, taking what I know about bears and then some of the attributes that I wanted to cover on these particular bears and pushing those, that's what you want to be able to do with your characters. So if you're, you know, if you're doing different people, well, make sure you're caricaturing the attributes of those people and really pushing them as far as you can. That's what I'm trying to do here. Here I know bears and I want to push now the specific attributes of what it is to be like fat. What's a fat bear look like? And I mean fat. Let's really make him fat, especially if we're in the business of caricature, if we're in the business of making characters, you know, then get in there and don't be afraid to push it. Because like I said, you can always come back and be a little bit more tame with your designs. But it's hard to go back the other way. So there we've got, you know, kind of a big happy fat bear. Like so. And it comes down like so. I'm going to go ahead and just put him off to the side. I'm actually going to, let me finish this out just a little bit because I'm really kind of digging this design. There we go. So let's take that and shrink it up. Let's turn these other ones on. But in just a little while, we took these three characters based on what we know right here of a real bear, and we created these 3 characters that have 3 completely different feels to them. Let's open him up a little bit. Let's bring him over here. There's the happy bear. Here's the fat bear. Like so. And taking individual character traits and really exploiting them to make the character that we're trying to come up with. Let me do this guy now. So here we've got the big mean bear. They're obviously all bears. If I showed this to somebody and they looked at it, with the exception of maybe this guy, he's a little dog looking, I'd probably go in and make some adjustments. But you know, people would say, oh, okay, those are bears. But if you saw them in a movie, you would see that they're distinctly different from one another. And that's the goal. You really want to push the traits of those characters. Now I've gone off and I've done a few other ones as examples. And I'm going to pull these over, and they're very quick. Here's something very basic. You know, this is a character that I did where I was thinking, okay, I need to do a thin guy. And so, you know, I really pushed it. I wanted to give him his posture. Like, you know, some thin people have this kind of very fluid S-shaped kind of floppy kind of posture. And so I wanted to really push that. And I emphasized his thinness by pulling his pants up really high, giving him really long legs, a longer nose, a very thin pointed face. These are all things that I did to make him feel thin, okay? This is an example where this is very, very quick. This is one of the first examples I thought of where the kid on the left, if someone said, okay, I want you to design a fat kid or a heavy kid. And this is something that somebody might draw initially. And this is something that I would see a lot of younger people do. But the one on the right is really taking that idea and really pushing it, having some fun with shape, and really pushing the idea of this big, round, happy, fat guy. And so there's that. Let me pull over a couple more. This is a character, and this is one where I'm really pushing the attitude as well. So I had this idea for this kind of this wine snob type character that a lot of people, we've all kind of met these types of people. They think they're better than everyone else and they kind of look down their noses. And using that expression, looking down his nose, I literally I tried to emphasize his nose and have him literally look down his nose. And I really pushed a pose and just his gesture, trying to suggest that he is this wine snob, literally taking a glass of wine and kind of swirling it around. And he's got his whole posture about, you know, the way he's got his arm under his other arm, and just, you know, all of that is pushed to emphasize the character and the attitude, okay? Here's another one. This is another one that I quickly did. I'm gonna blow this up. This is a Viking character. Obviously, it's a Viking character. And this is, once again, something else, something that someone might do initially. So I had this idea for a Viking character. He should be like this Viking warrior, and he's a little older. He's been around the block. And so I drew this, and everything is, you know, it flows fairly well. He's got a good costume. But I thought, okay, this is like a first pass. Now, it's also very realistic. Now, if I had an art direction where it needs to be pushed, and I can push the cartooniness and I can push the caricature, then that will allow me to really have some fun with it. So in that spirit, I did this. And this is just a quick pass, but you can see what I wanted to really push the idea that he's big and he's burly and he's strong and he's been around the block. And so I really kind of, you know, you can see I brought his waist down lower. I opened up some of the space so that you can feel the size of his chest a bit more. I gave him bigger hands in contrast to the size of his head. A much bigger beard, a bigger axe. I just wanted everything to feel big and burly and strong with this guy. So I really pushed it. Here's the one that feels much more realistic, more human, more like real humans. And then here is the one where I went and really pushed the idea of a big Viking warrior, kind of really strong guy. So let's go to something that's photographic. The other day I designed a gorilla character. I just felt like doing that, and I wanted to do something for this video. And so I was looking at this picture that I found online, and it's a great photo of a gorilla. And so I wanted to kind of take the attributes of what we think of gorillas and what we see here and really emphasize them. Well, gorillas are big, they're strong, their arms are huge. They're very, they have big back muscles, big neck muscles. Their face in comparison with the rest of their body is relatively small. So I wanted to take all those attributes and push them even more, but I still wanted a character that was peaceful looking. So I did this based on this same, based on that photograph, but you can see, and let me do this real quick. You can see here that, if you look at the size of these forearms, I really pushed the size of the forearms. I shrunk up his butt, so that this chest feels really, really big. I wanted to really push that. I pushed the size of his neck. I shrunk the size of his face in relation to the rest of his body. These are all things that I wanted to feel like he is the king. He is in charge of his troop, of his harem, but he's also contemplative, and he's not necessarily a bad guy. So that's something else I did there. Here's another one where I wanted to do a pose of a woman. I wanted to design something that was very elegant and very female and very pretty, and so I did this drawing of this character. And this one I really let the pose kind of do the work. I wanted something very fluid. And so here I was pushing that idea. I wanted fluidity, I wanted gracefulness, and I pushed that idea and tried to really emphasize that in the pose of this character. I wanted a very strong feminine shape. So I turned her around so we saw her from behind. I wanted that hourglass feel, and I wanted that pose to flow right up into the hands. I even posed her hands very, very feminine, very fluid. So right up into the hair. Notice the hair kind of goes up into a very fluid kind of feminine sweep. And so that's what I was thinking about here. Even the little folds in her dress as the drapery hangs down, I wanted it to feel like it flows, and I wanted everything to feel like it's flowing. And so that's another example of really pushing the pose, letting that pose support the design. Okay, so it's not just the design that I'm talking about, but I'm also talking about posing. And then lastly, I've got this character, and I've used him in some of my other videos. And I wanted to show this one because it includes a bear as well. And this is a bear that, once again, we know real bears, but here I wanted something that was a bit even more cartoony. So I took all those attributes and just made a bear that was really pushed, really cartoony. But I've also got this mountain man character that I've been playing with, and I wanted him to, he's this old kind of mountain man guy. And so I've got some other expressions, and I'll blow these up too. And I've had some fun with this character. And so once again, taking that idea of a mountain man and really pushing it, taking out the stuff I don't need and emphasizing the stuff that I want. He's got a big beard. He wears animal skins on his head. His teeth, maybe his teeth aren't the best. And really pushing his expressions, really pushing the broadness. I wanted something that was cartoony. So I wanted to really go in and, once again, not play the middle of the road. I wanted to push everything as far as I could and then have some fun with it and be very strong with my statement. So that's covering pushing your design. Make sure that, when you're sitting down, get in the habit of not falling in love with that first version. That's something that a lot of people will do. They'll draw in that first version, and then they start playing with costume, or they start playing with props and that sort of thing, rather than doing a lot of work up front and playing with proportion, experimenting. Take the time to do that, because if you can really push your characters, especially if you're doing a lineup of characters, then you're going to have a lineup that will feel distinctive from one another, and they'll be a lot more entertaining and a lot more pleasing to look at. Okay, so that's pushing your character. Let's go ahead and move on to the next video.